inundated with that kind of messaging, I feel like that doesn't really hold up because there's a lot of Jews who like, and I mean, like, I feel like you can like make up for that with time lost or by like, I don't know, studying, like doing Holocaust studies or like, I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of like Jews who weren't affected by the Holocaust or didn't have family who perished and they're still like connected to it, even though it didn't happen to them directly just because they've been surrounded by it. So I don't feel
But
like
why do they feel connected? What makes them feel connected?
If they've been inundated with that messaging and they feel like bound together by like a sense of peoplehood, I feel like that could still.
But again, I would ask you, what would be the difference between somebody, a Gentile, who is not interested in becoming a Jew, but as a human being, he feels he could get involved and feel. I mean, I think I mentioned Jordan Peterson sometimes here, right? You know who I mean, the right-wing intellectual.
Yeah.
So one of the major themes that he comes again and again to is the Holocaust, trying to understand benevolence and wickedness and the human spirit. So there's a lot of digging I can do around the Holocaust, which does not necessarily connect to my being Jewish.
I mean, Udi, I think in some ways, like maybe to answer your question, I'm not sure if it gets at it, but the Holocaust seems like it was in such magnitude, like compared to like the destruction of the temple, like that it's like this monumental event in Jewish history that it's like it transformed like Jewish like society as a whole and Jewish culture as a whole. And I think that it can be looked at as like such an event of such magnitude. It's like it was truly like it's like it was like the seismic shock almost.
So what you're saying, I hear you, if I understand correctly, is that it's not the historical fact of the Holocaust, because in this sense, the convert doesn't have this history. He doesn't belong to this history, right? He's not going to become part of this history. But it's because the historical impact or the outcome that what you're saying is it influences Jewishness itself.
Yeah.
Right? Did I understand you correctly?
Yeah. The nature of Judaism.
Exactly. So that Judaism is not the same after the Holocaust. And therefore, when I connect as a convert to Judaism, I'm connecting to the Judaism that has this post-trauma in it.
But so what's interesting is that, like what we've been talking about the last few weeks, like the Exodus from Egypt, you're commanded to remember it every day. And every Jew is supposed to think of themselves as if they had been there for the Exodus. So would this question apply there? Like, would a convert feel differently somehow about, you think a convert would feel differently? Why though?
It's the same question. What is the impact? Is there an impact? Are we Jews by history? What is it? What makes us Jews? Okay. Are we Jews by history? Is that what makes us Jews? Because our ancestors and the fathers and the fathers and the fathers of all of us were Jewish. So we have this historical line. Or is there something, it's like, I don't know, do you know the term, the water remembers?
No.
It's a book. I mean, what I'm saying is that you know what, let's take the original Holocaust as an example. Okay, we're talking about the destruction of the temple. Now, there's a very interesting passage in the Talmud Okay. Now, just to understand the context, the first generation of sages that we know about are called Anshe Knesset Agdola, the members of the Great Assembly. Now, it's not even clear who they were. I mean, there's some versions that it was sort of 120, like the Israeli parliament today, about 120 sages. It's not very clear. And we're talking about between the destruction of the first temple and the beginning of the second temple. And one of the Talmud asks, why did they call this group, this assembly, why did the sages give the name of the Great Assembly? What's great about it? Okay, that's the context. So, Kyla, keep going. It is because, this is the answer.
It is because they returned the crown to its former glory. How so? Moses said in his prayer, God the great, the mighty, and the awesome God. Keep going.
Yeah.
Jeremiah the prophet came and said, Gentiles, or the minions of Nebuchadnezzar, are carousing in his sanctuary. Where is his awesomeness? Therefore he admitted awesome in his prayer. The great God, the mighty Lord of hosts, is his name. Daniel came and said, Gentiles are enslaving his children. Where is his might? Therefore admitted mighty in his prayer, the great and awesome God. Then came the members of the great assembly and said, on the contrary, this is the
let's stop just to understand. What was the story that happened between the prayer that Moses initiated and the reaction of Jeremiah and Daniel?
Wait, sorry, can you say your question again?
What happened there? There was a prayer that was said in the synagogue of Moses, okay, that Moses initiated. And that prayer, by the way, we say it until today. Ha'el Agadol Agibor Vanoah. God the great, the mighty, and the awesome. Now what happens? Jeremiah is seeing the temple destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. So what is he saying to himself?
The Babylonian Gentiles are like desecrating the synagogue or inside our synagogue. God is not awesome, or like we shouldn't pray to God.
Well,
because they're ruining, they're like destroying the Jewish people.
Right. How can you say that God is awesome if this is what's happening to his temple? Right? So Jeremiah is changing the prayer of Moses. And how do we know this? Because there's a passage here from Jeremiah. You see the great Lord God, the mighty Lord of hosts. What's missing here? What's the word, if you compare it to the prayer of Moses? What's not here?
Hanorah, awesome.
Right, awesome. Right? Now, that's what the Talmud says. That was the reaction of Jeremiah to the destruction of the temple. Do you get it? Do you understand what's going on here? Then came Daniel. What happens with Daniel?
He takes out mighty from the prayer, but he
Because
keeps awesome. Because, the Israelites are being enslaved. So therefore, God isn't showing his might.
not just Israelites, the children of God, right? It's a personal thing. If God stands by and sees his children being massacred, okay, this is why I'm saying it's the first Holocaust. And God is standing by. So I can't call him the mighty. Do you understand? What's the reason
Why are
for
they
the
so why are they even praying then? Like they're gonna nitpick and say, well, he's not awesome, he's not mighty. So why are they even praying?
Good question. But first of all, it's important to see how the sages, I mean, again, this is something that no Orthodox rabbi would be willing to say, right? This is Talmud. The problem is that I think most rabbis are teaching us that we have to comply with the prayer as it is. And if we have questions on God, we might have questions on God, but we don't touch the prayer. We'll continue saying it before the Holocaust and after the Holocaust, the same. Now comes the second stage. So why are they called the Great Assembly? They returned the crown to its former glory. Whose crown is this? What is the crown that was de-glorified? Crown of God, right?
Is it
Now,
like a
how did they do
metaphorical
it?
crown?
What?
Is it like a metaphorical crown?
Of course. The crown. I mean, in England, when you say the crown, you know what you mean, right? It's not the crown itself. It's what it embellished. So then comes second stage. The people of the Great Assembly. And what do they say? Keep reading.
Then came the members of the Great Assembly and said, on the contrary, this is the fulfillment of his might, that he conquers his inclination and that he exercises patience toward the wicked. And these acts also express his awesomeness. Were it not for the awesomeness of the Holy One, blessed be he, how could one people survive among the nations?
So what do they do? Are they changing the facts? Are they saying, no, you were wrong. God is really good. He takes care. What are they doing to the words of Gvura?
They're kind of
yeah?
they're kind of playing on the words in the sense that it's like he conquers his inclination and that he exercises. It's like kind of like those words are like applicable to God himself, or God himself, and rather than like on his subject.
They're solving the problem. There's a theological terrible problem that is posed here, right? How can God be so strong and allow evil to rule? How can God be so great and allow for such a massacre to happen? That's the classical. What?
And I assume we'll take this and apply it to the Holocaust, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
I'm reading it directly to the Holocaust. It's directly going to the Holocaust. This is why I'm reading it with you. Now, first, it's very important to acknowledge that the Talmud gives voice to these claims, to these demands, to these cries. it doesn't try to push it away. It doesn't try to say, oh no, it's not such a bad problem. The future will show, I don't know, whatever. What's the Odyssey, Kyla?
It's like God still being good despite evil.
Yeah, but does it say that he's good here?
No. But I'm just saying, like, it's like, it was relevant to an earlier point you made.
Okay. Now, before we go to understand what is the answer that they're giving, how did they restore the crown? The Gemara asks a question about Jeremiah and Daniel. And what's the question? Keep going.
Gemara asks, and the great ones, i.e. Jeremiah and Daniel, how could they do this and uproot an ordinance instituted by Moses, the greatest teacher, who instituted the mention of these attributes in prayer?
You understand the question? Here is Moses, who composed the prayer, the great Moses. How can we, the little people, not us even at their time, change? And like you said, you even ask even stronger, almost not commend God. How could they allow themselves to do this? So what's the answer?
Rabbi Eliezer?
Yeah.
Said,
Elazar, yeah.
Elazar said, they did so because they knew of the Holy One, blessed be he, that he is truthful and hates a lie. Consequently, they did not speak falsely about him.
Now that's the most important message that I want to get from this. This is a very, very important message in any dialogue between us and God. What is this? What is this ultimate demand?
That they should be honest about God's shortcomings, because it would be worse to lie about them.
Why are you saying they?
That we, I guess.
It's a message to us. You should never try to twist the truth with God. So many times, rabbis or Jewish leaders are trying to mold and twist the truth in order for it to keep being compatible with God. And here we see that the great ones, Jeremiah and Daniel, are not willing, even though they know that Moses is great, and they probably believe that what he's saying is true, but they cannot voice something which is not totally honest with them. Right? It's better to stay silent or not to speak something than to say something which is false. You can't come to synagogue and just quote whatever is there. God demands truth of you. To worship God is to worship truth. Truth is the communication, is the pipeline of our connection with God. And if we go back a minute to the converts, it's not just that what you said, Kyla, which is true, that Judaism is not a missionary religion. It's more than that. Why do they tell the convert or the would-be convert these facts?
Because God doesn't like us.
Okay. They don't say that.
God's not dependable, and he sometimes fails to protect us.
Right. Don't think that by coming under the Jewish wing, you're going to have any security. Almost the opposite. You have to know, because we have to be true with you. And you have to be truthful with God. We have to make clear the baseline of our connection. It's not based on telling him how great the Jewish nation is and he will have olam haba. Afterwards, there are statements. If we continue, I don't think we'll do it today, but next time, we'll see. They don't stop at that. It's not the only thing that they say, but this is at the gate. You want to go in, you have to face the reality, the facts. You have to be honest with God. This is our first demand from you.
So if Jewish people feel as if God has failed to deliver his end of the bargain to protect them and such, then why do they have to uphold any side of their bargain about being honest?
No, about being honest, they will stay. You're asking something else. If God is not abiding but these promises, are we still supposed to be in dialogue with God? I mean, you have to see that they're not saying, if we go back to Jeremiah and Daniel, okay? It's not that they stopped praying. They just said the only things that they feel they can say. Okay, these are quotes from Jeremiah. They kept on praying. They just wouldn't lie. They didn't disconnect themselves from God. They just didn't. That's I think what you meant by theodicy. I can believe in God and say he's not good. I cannot say that God is good.
And what's the point? Like, what's the point in believing in a God that you don't think is good?
That's a very, very deep question, but I would ask you the opposite. Are you believing in God only that for that he will be nice to you?
No, but nice and good are different things. Nice means you got what you want.
But I mean, is believing in God dependent on his being almighty? That's what Jeremiah said, or good?
I guess belief isn't rooted in good, but a desire to like invest anything in God would be hard to convince someone if they didn't think God was fundamentally good.
Yeah, but you're saying now something which is the other extreme. It's not that I'm saying God is bad. I can't say that God is bad, because then it would be evil to worship him. I'm just acknowledging that either he's not almighty, right? Or he's not all good. I'm facing reality. You can't fool around with reality. Now let's go and see a little bit how did they try to fix this without changing, without playing around with the facts. So they said, on the contrary, what is the might of God? This is the fulfillment of his might, that he conquers his inclination and that he exercises patience toward the wicked. It's a different type of might. What are they doing? They're changing or reframing what does it mean to be mighty.
But I think they're just mixing the words mighty and compassionate.
They're not,
sure,
they're
like
not saying
if you,
compassionate.
No, but I'm saying they're calling it might. What they're saying is that he exercises patience toward the wicked. That they may think that that is a good thing, but that's not what might means, right? Like the word they're thinking there is patience and compassion.
I'll give you a very concrete example.
Okay.
If somebody goes in the street and curses you or hits you even, would your mightiness be fulfilled by you hitting him back or cursing him back?
Not necessarily.
Why? Does that mean if you didn't do it, would that make you a weakling?
No.
If you decide to hold your anger, to contain your anger, and not to express it, that's what they're saying. By the way, not only here, in Chazal, you probably know there's a famous Ezu Gibor, who is the mighty. You remember this? It's a very famous sage's quote. Ezu Gibor, HaKovesh et Yitzro. Who is the mighty one? The person who can kovesh, who can hold inside, control, dominate his anger. That's a demand not only in God. It's a different definition of the idea of mighty. Now we can accept it or not. What's important is that they did what they're doing is reinterpreting our conception of God. They're not willing to lie, but they are willing to reframe, to look at it in a more complex way. When a child says, my father is strong, and my father is stronger than your father, the child thinks that being strong means that if there's a fist fight, my father will kill your father. But that's a childish notion of mighty. Okay? Now the same thing is about his awesomeness. On one hand, God does not intervene in history and stop the Jewish suffering. But what do they look at? What do they do? Instead of looking at the persecution of the Jewish people, they are looking at the other side of it. And what's the other side? Which is truth as well.
The survival.
Jewish survival. right?
Udi, I feel like your point that you were making just a few moments ago, like spoke to what Kayla wrote in the chat with like theodicity, like the idea of like justifying God in the face of evil and like reframing God. Like I feel like that's what, and like Kayla, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that might be like one way in which like it's used to like justify like suffering in the face of suffering in the face of evil and like God's role in that.
So what is it? What do you do with this? What does it demand of you? The most important thing that it demands of you before anything else is to be truthful. Okay, if you can't buy the interpretation of the members of the Knesset Agdolah, then you act like Jeremiah or like Daniel, right? You can accept it or not accept it. But what's important is I cannot look in the face of truth and twist it for the sake of religion or for the sake of faith or even for the sake of politics. I can look. Yeah, sorry.
So, sorry, I didn't. No, when you're done.
No, it's okay.
This I think this also is similar to like Lo B'Shamayim Hi, like it's not in heaven. I remember like learning about this like in school, like the idea it doesn't relate to like being mad at God, but like it's essentially saying like it's not up to God to determine the outcome of certain problems, and it's up to us to kind of
I think you're right. There is a connection there, because let's go deeper and theologically deeper. What's the biggest problem? Sometimes people ask me, do you believe in God or don't you believe in God? What's the right answer for that question? What would you answer?
Is this a test?
Yeah.
I'd say I do.
You say I do.
Yeah.
Emma, what do you say?
Yeah, I usually say I believe in God.
What?
I usually say I believe in God.
You usually say you believe in God. Does that mean that you usually believe in God, or that you just usually say you believe in God?
Usually, it depends on the I do. I think it's just like a kind of a blanket. Like that's a difficult question to ask. I feel like that.
Kyla, what do you say? Do you believe in God?
Yeah, I say yeah.
Okay. I will tell you a different answer. Tell me, what God are you talking about when you're asking me if I believe in him, and I'll tell you. Because there's no one definition of God. There's no one concept of God. If God is this old man in the sky that keeps auditing and measuring our good deeds versus bad deeds, and if we do something good, he gives us candy, and if we do something bad, he hits us over the head, then no, I don't believe in that God.
Haven't you? I feel like I've heard you say this before, and I feel like you made the argument. You made the argument that like atheists in some ways are more.
Exactly.
I don't
me.
remember.
It's Rabbi Cook. Rabbi Cook says this, that some believe. You're right. I think we talked about it. Rabbi Cook says that sometimes an atheist is a better believer than a believer.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because if the atheist goes against a notion, which is a false notion of God, then he's correct. He's not believing in the right in the wrong God, which is good. Now, the problem becomes deeper because actually there is no definition of God. In a way, if I say I don't believe in God, I'm the most truthful. You understand what I'm saying? Sounds paradoxical, right? The minute I define God in any way, clearly not the primitive, childish definition of God that I gave before, but even if I try to give more complicated and more sophisticated definitions of God, the minute I define him, by definition, he becomes false. Because any definition of God means that in somehow I grasp him.
Udi, I have a question. For like, I guess then my question is when like people like there are instances where people like are saying like my belief in God like saved me, or like people were in such difficult situations that they like kind of relied on God, or they looked to God as kind of like their saving grace. And like in some ways I feel like that means that they need to grasp God and they need to define God. So in that situation, if they grasp and define God in that situation, are they like becoming like moving farther away, or are they just grasping something that's more personal rather than universal?
But I think if I will translate what you said to an answer to the question, do you believe in God? One not bad answer would be sometimes. Right? When my son was born, I felt I got a present from God. Right? We waited for him for many years. There was a lot of abortions on the way, not abortions, miscarriages on the way. We really prayed and waited for it. So when he was born, I believed in God. God gave me a present. Now then, about a year after, we found out that he's deaf and that he has cerebral palsy. So at that time, I got a smack from God. He abused me. Now, what's the definition of this God that gave me the present and then abused me? And I'm just talking personal. Take it to the level of the Shoah. This is exactly what the people of the Knesset Agdolah, the Great Assembly, said. I'm not ignoring the fact that we are being chased all over the generations. This is our very bad relationship with God. But at the same time, I can't ignore the fact that my son married and has 3 children. Another twist in the plot, right? First he gives me a present, then he hits me over the head, and then my son marries, and then he has 3 grandchildren. So can I sum up my relationship with God? Can I define this God? I'm sure that all of them are from God. You have to understand. Every time it happened, I blamed or thanked God for it. What do you think?
It makes me think about like the papers I have to write in college and how like there's like these plots with like riddled with all these different kinds of tensions, and then there's like so many different kinds of things that you can like pick up on and to incorporate, but you also have to like limit yourself in terms of what you want to talk about and define it, and that itself is difficult and also presents an ethical issue in itself. And then there's the second issue of like, okay, well, like based off of like the very limited of material that I do choose, how am I going to summarize it and how am I going to make an argument pushing forth one perspective about it? And it's the same thing. It's like the exact same thing that you're describing.
So what would be a way to approach this dilemma?
Refuse to write a paper and like refuse to participate.
That's not a great solution. I
don't think there is a solution. You have to.
I think the solution is not in the object, but in the subject. Not on the objective, but on the subjective. And that's understanding our limits. Being humble. When I'm humble, I know that I don't know. Or at least I know that I know very little. Now, the minute I approach writing an essay or praying to God or whatever, from this basic thing that says, I am limited. I'm a human being. I'm vulnerable. I can hate God and love God even at the same time. Right? The only absolute is God. And therefore, even in papers, I think it's a good solution in papers too. If you write it from a humble point of view, usually when we want to say something, we come from a very omnipotent disposition. I have the truth, and now I'm going to share it with you, or I'm going to tell it to you.
But this interpretation is the right one. Here's why.
What?
Or like, this is my interpretation. Here's why it's right then.
Right. This is, by the way, one of the reasons, it has to do with the sugya, basically, of the central part of disagreements within Jewish culture, within Jewish thought, within the Talmud. The minute you know that there's somebody else who thinks opposite, immediately, if you're really willing to accept the other's point of view, the existence of the point of view, it doesn't have to be that you accept his point of view, but you accept that there is a legitimacy, automatically you become humble because you say, okay, this is how I understand this. Or even, I always say, we say Shema Yisrael 2 times a day, in the morning and in the evening. Now, what's the proclamation of Shema Yisrael? What is the statement? What are we saying when we say Shema Yisrael?
God's one.
Hear Israel, God is our God and God is one. So it's a proclamation of faith, right? Now I always ask, why do we have to say 2 times a day? Why isn't 1 time enough? One is in the morning and the other is at night.
Maybe it's like for Pesach, you have to remember it in the day and the night. There's some significance in that.
Okay.
I don't know what it is, but there are a lot of things that you do in Judaism that are important multiple times.
Yeah, you're right. But I think here there's a more specific reason. And that is when I proclaim my faith in the morning, it's going to be tested all through the day. If I'm alive, if I'm somebody who's interacting with life, then I am not the same person at the end of the day that I was in the beginning. I mean, hopefully, most people are the same. Most people go through the motions. But a Jew is demanded to be acutely alive. And living means this interaction, this give and take all the time. And I might be head over the head during the day, and I might be extended unbelievable love. So we have to go back, because the word God is one, and God is our God, is again undefinable, undefinable. We can't define it, right? So each time we say it, we have to be there, be in the moment, and see what does it mean for me now? What is the like there's about radio waves or television waves, it doesn't really matter, that we send on communication. You know what I mean? I mean, how does, or even now, telephone, whatever. So the waves are static, but our voice is the one that changes and creates the personal voice of what we just said. So the Shema in itself is a constant, right? It has the same wavelength all the time. But we have to meet God, if you want, or meet in the sense of confront, or not only in the negative sense, long for. I mean, this is someone. Again, someone is a definition which is against all definitions, but it's sort of a communication between me and this undefined God, which has to be, and that's the important thing, has to be truthful, has to acknowledge that God is not a nice guy. That God is not mighty in the sense that he forces people to do this or that. But not in the negative sense. That means he's not there. That means the opposite. I'm in a relationship with him, her, by this dialogue. And the dialogue has to be truthful. And if I'm truthful, then I'm in connection with God. One of the names of God is Emet, truth. God has a lot of names. The other most important one is Shalom. But you need Emet and you need Shalom. And that's why it's the first thing we say to the convert who comes in. We have to tell him, listen, this group is based on honesty, on telling you the truth in your face. This is what it means to become a part of the Jewish people, at least during the diaspora. You want to be part of it? Good. You don't want to be? Also good. There's no demand for you to become Jewish. But if you become Jewish, you have to know that this is the deal. And we're not going to beautify it for you.
Guys, I'm sorry. I have to step off and have dinner with my family.
It's okay. We're finishing.
But I'll see everyone next week. Udi, hopefully you'll have a new grandchild next week.
Maybe.
Or I don't know if that's too early. I don't know if that's too early.
No. It's supposed to be any day now.
Okay, good. Good. I'll see you guys next week.
This time is good for you, right?
This works great for me. Yeah.
Okay.
I will say I am spending the summer in Israel, and I don't think I have the same kind of stamina as you, Udi, to wake up at 4 a.m. and do it. So we'll have to figure something out then.
First of all, when you come to Israel, you live here, and I wake you up every time.
Yeah, I'm going to be in Tel Aviv, so it's going to be a loud shout.
Okay.
Okay, I'll see you guys next week.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
You too. Bye, Udi.
Bye. Shabbat shalom.